Hey folks, it's me, Brandon. In case any of you don't know, I've recently started doing private firearms lessons, and it's doing really well actually. I've got appointments all scheduled up and people are just hitting me with a litany of questions left and right. And honestly, I love it. I like being able to help improve people's skills, their knowledge. I really enjoy teaching, especially something that I'm passionate about, and firearms happens to be one of those things. So, one of the questions I've been hit with a lot, and I think for posterity's sake, it would be great just to get this online. So if anyone has this question, maybe you could learn something from it. Pass it on, and if you disagree with any of this, and feel free to comment as to what exactly I did not get or something that you'd like to add. I'm in no way the end of knowledge. There's so much about this topic that stretches on for hundreds and hundreds of years. There's half a millennia of firearms history in just one company alone, and there's so many more to expand out of. So one question I get asked with a lot is, Brandon, I don't have much firearms experience at all. Most of the things I know about guns I've picked up from like Call of Duty. Maybe I got a handgun that was passed down to me from my great grandpa, an old Smith & Wesson or a revolver or something that's not quite modernized, and you don't even know if it holds up to modern standards, how to shoot it, anything like those questions. And a lot of people ask me, if you were reaching out and you were buying your first gun, where to start? Do you start with a pistol? Do you start with a rifle? Do you start with a shotgun? Where are we in this spectrum? And the honest answer is, it really depends on your use case and who you are as a person. My first weapon that I purchased was an AR-15 rifle. It was that one right over there in the corner, and it wasn't very expensive. It was a little Bushmaster AR. I got as a hand-me-down from someone that I really respected at the time. And the thing about this was I was in the Army. I had to do semi-annual training on these things where I would go in and do range qualifications, and depending on how I scored, that would promote me. That would put me ahead of my peers or behind them and schedule me up for promotions or not. And I've won a couple ribbons just from shooting in the Army, just from... The Army is really weird, where if you walk in and you shoot 40 out of 40 targets, they look at that as the same weight as an entire college degree in terms of promotion points. You understand? They take that really seriously. So why shouldn't I, right? Just a couple $100s and some plinking time down at the range, and just getting my fundamentals down really helped me shoot beyond just the regular Joe. Every once in a while I'd, do very, very well. So for me, it made more sense to own the AR-15 first, because I was on a military base. Doesn't really make sense to open carry. Most people look at you like a weirdo. It was a National Guard base, for any of you active duty guys freaking out. They treat us like people. We can have guns on the base. It's crazy, I know. But anyways, I digress, getting a little off topic. So for me, I started with that bad boy and, just trained my fundamentals down. And then I picked up my first handgun. And I was thinking of the line of, something practical, a concealed carry. I was in your shoes and I had to dive in, ask all my gun expert friends, and thankfully, a lot of the people I got to talk to happened to be like Army Rangers, Special Forces guys, people with a litany of knowledge and a huge history of people that dwarfed my experience, and I just sat there absorbing it like a sponge. So a lot of the stuff that I got were lessons learned by other people who have fought in armed conflicts, several generations of armed conflicts, and a lot of that's been passed down to me, and I refuse to be the last reliquary for that information. Hopefully I can pass a lot of that on to you. So my first lesson is, when it comes to firearms, we need to talk about the difference between old and obsolete and ineffective. What I mean by old. So let's talk tools, right? This is a watch. Not just any watch, it's a pocket watch. An Elgin model 1888. It was a railroad edition, so conductors or the person that would go up and check the tickets on the trains would go up, and whenever they would change any time zones rather, he would come through and everybody could set their watches to his, because his was so accurate. So the purpose of this watch 120 years ago, 140 years ago, was to be as precise as possible, where you could wind it up and it wouldn't be off by any seconds, and it could keep steady time so that as they travel, it would be reliable, right? So this watch is old. it keeps the time well. If I set it to a time and I run it, I'm not losing any really precious seconds. And if I am, it's minuscule, right? It gets the job done. It keeps time. Now it's old. It is effective, but it's also, you could argue, in many cases, obsolete. Obsolete simply means there's a better way to do it. It's not the modern practice anymore. People have kind of developed better ways to run this. But that doesn't mean that this doesn't have its strengths. This will never run out of batteries, right? Every single part in here is completely mechanical. There will never be a moment where this won't get connection to the internet and then it won't be able to work. Now, you can move on to this same style of watch, right? You can move it over to a wristwatch, right? And with a mechanical dial. This is a marriage watch. What they used to do is take those pocket watch and turn them into a more compact wristwatch that was less in the way. It was closer adhered to your body. You could, cover it up in a sleeve if you didn't want people to see exactly what you had on you. It was easily concealable, but it still kept the time, right? Still mechanical in nature, still has the advantage that it doesn't run out of batteries, right? Compare that to something more modern, an Apple Watch, okay? This thing can tell you the weather in Tokyo. It can open your Tesla. It can tell you if you're having a heart attack. It can tell you the time. It can browse the internet. There's so many things that this thing can do, but it's limited in the fact that if something were to break, there's very few people that can actually fix this. You have to send it into Apple, and they have to work their whole mystic apparatus to get it done and bring them to the wizards. If it gets the wrong software update, the whole thing could brick, and there's nothing you could really do to revert it until Daddy Apple comes down and fixes the problem for you, right? So while this has more capabilities and range, right, it's not as durable, or its longevity is not really going to be there. In 120 years, right, are people still going to be hanging on to 6th generation Apple iWatches, or will these have been long recycled for their gold or whatever's inside of them? You tell me. I don't actually know. So, will they all keep time? Yes. But there's also, we're looking at the higher end of things. I showed you an Elgin pocket watch, one of the nicer watches. Those survive because of quality. I showed you an old school Omega marriage watch. Omegas are quality watches. They last the test of time. You're looking at quality hand-fit parts. That's what makes it last long, right? Compare it to something like an old school Soviet Raketa, mass-produced, right? These watches were all machined parts, machined gears, and these bad boys don't run anymore. They're cool, they're collectible if you like old Soviet things, right? But, an old school Soviet AK, that's reliable. Old school Soviet watch, not really. Even when they're running, they're not exactly keeping time. Obsolete, old, ineffective. So that brings us to the topic of firearms, right? A firearm is a tool, much like your wristwatch. Now, a wristwatch, right, tells you the time, right? What about something, let's set up a scenario, you're in a dark room and you need to traverse from one side to the next. And the only light you have is, well, what you have on you right now, whatever you can reach at arm's length. Well, likely, many of you have something like this, right? Many of you are carrying around some sort of cell phone that's got a light device on it. And you can tell it's bright enough if I need to, turn all the lights off and navigate through the room. But, the real thing about this is, again, the battery, limited in capacity, limited in output. If it was a real emergency situation, all the power's out, and you need to signal someone in complete darkness, it might be effective. But if you need to signal someone and there's other light sources, there's street lights, there's sirens, whatever this isn't going to do that much in an emergency situation. When I was deployed down to the Texas border, they gave us flashlights to help spot people. They gave us these beautiful little tiny streamlights. Now this bad boy is about an inch smaller than the length of my phone. And when you compare the light source, not even comparable. It's so many lumens that it's disorienting. If I shine it and moving my hand in one direction, you can't see what my other hand is doing. This provides, well, almost concealment in a sense. Not really concealment, but it distracts the opponent's eyes so they can't see where your hands are. Moreover, if it's an emergency situation, there's lights, this can really get someone's attention. This lets someone know where I'm looking way more than that flashlight. This is I would say a medium-sized flashlight that has the ability to do long range as well as a light, dim, up close searching inside of a car or whatever capability. So with this one, you get the ability to go far to an extent, intense to an extent, but also has a low, concealment. If I needed to put this in my pocket, not have someone know I had it, you could do that. Now you compare that to like an emergency light. You can go pick up something like this at Costco, right? It's Chinese, rechargeable, as well as battery replacement. Goes up to 5,000 lumens. And it's an excessive amount of light. If I wanted to blind you with this, it's too much. The lowest setting is the highest setting of the streamlight. This is the emergency light. You keep this in the truck, the garage. You keep this in the woodshed. You keep this. You keep this in the emergency place that you have already predetermined that you keep this at. And whenever the lights go really out and there's an emergency, like whole city grid's down and you need to direct people through the street or whatever, this is the light you use to make presence. People will see you with this light. Wherever you point the light, people are going to notice what you're pointing it at. People aren't going to like it when you point this light at them. It's going to make them very uncomfortable. A lot of people don't even like it seeing this light, knowing what it can do if they have an experience with that. If you're quick, you're understanding the parallels I'm making to firearms. Every day, you should get in the practice of having a concealed carry handgun. Your concealed carry handgun, because hopefully you live in the great state of Texas where you have constitutional carry, and you do not need to go out and get a permit to have this, but what you should do is get familiarity with this weapon before you start trying to tuck it in strange places on your body. Please do that. I implore you. It would behoove you to do so. For a good starter handgun, I would recommend something in 9mm or above. If you're a brand new shooter, I wouldn't go to 10mm or 45. And there's going to be a lot of people who love 10mm, 45, 40 Smith & Wesson who are going to swear by them up and down. I get that. Please understand, for a new shooter, they might not really enjoy the recoil so much. So if you give them a smaller gun, they're going to think it's going to have less recoil, but it's actually going to be way more snappy. Your wrist is going to be taking a lot of that absorption. It's going to make a lot more noise. You're going to feel more of the recoil. There's going to be more of that muzzle bang. And when you're not used to that, that can be very intimidating, and it might actually keep people from practicing on the weapon that will ultimately keep them safe if there's ever an emergency. Now, for most people, they're never going to use this weapon in an emergency situation. It's going to sit in the safe, or it's going to sit next to you as like some sort of mystic talisman to ward off evil, and that's fine. But I do think it's important for everyone to know how to handle, how to use, and how to operate firearms, for the simple fact that there's more firearms in the United States than there are people, so chances are you're probably going to run into one. Knowing how to recognize when one is safe, when one is not safe to shoot, when one is loaded with incorrect ammunition that might cause a serious, issue. Some guns can chamber certain ammunition. If it fits, it flies, and that's perfectly fine. Other guns, like a 300 Blackout can fit inside of a, traditional AR-15, and then when you squeeze the trigger, it blows your barrel in half and may cause injury. So knowing simple things like this, the more familiarity you have, the higher your confidence level with the weapon systems go up. When it goes to concealed carry, you typically want something that is polymer, relatively cheap. On the off chance that you actually do have to use this in a self-defense situation, it's going to a police evidence locker and it's going to sit there for the rest of its life. It does not make sense to spend exorbitant amounts of money on a concealed carry weapon that may ultimately just end up sitting in a carry locker that you're never going to get back. So for something like a concealed carry, we have this beautiful little Glock 43. This is a great handgun for beginners. Comes with a 10-round magazine. And Glocks are essentially the Toyotas of the gun world. You don't really need to know a lot about maintenance. They don't need oil hardly at all, if ever. They can go the longest from any weapon system without cleaning it. They have reliable systems and internals and components. Now, just like a Toyota, it is a little soulless. Most of the beauty is under the hood, as you can maybe understand. It's in the engineering. It's how it was made. It's in the robustness of how this thing will operate. Now, what I love about this is I can take this and throw this in my glove box, essentially. And whenever I need it, I just press my little key code, get my pistol out, and I'm ready if I ever need this ever. Now, if some hooligan comes in and busts my window and pries open my glove box and cranks this bad boy out and runs off with it, well, that's terrible, but I'm not out a Staccato or an Atlas or a Dan Wesson, or I'm not missing a Nighthawk. Like, this is a reasonable price point for something very reliable. It's the Toyota Camry, Toyota Corolla, the Tacoma, right? It's gonna get you those rounds. Now, there are downsides to a Glock, things that kind of make me stay away generally from something, a full size or something like that. It's just typically, I'm not the biggest fan of polymer guns. A polymer gun is typically made of a composite plastic type material. And if you ever watch videos of Glocks firing in slow motion, you'll even see the plastic kind of warp and bend. And it's not, the polymer is made to handle that. Don't get me wrong. It's polymers, especially if you're dealing with like wet and watery stuff and you're crawling around through mud, like a polymer handle is appropriate. But for me, I like just knowing that my frame is solid. So I tend to like steel or aluminum over polymer. And that's personal preference, right? A polymer gun is going to wear down faster than a metal gun. But a polymer gun is also lighter than an aluminum or a steel gun. So the advantage to the Glock, especially for concealed carry, is you can concealed carry a very light, very reliable polymer gun that you can throw around, bang around, drop in the glove box, kind of abuse. And Glock mags are renowned for being very reliable. One of the things I like about Glock is they make the magazine first and then make the gun around the magazine to make it compatible. So every Glock is interchangeable with almost every other Glock magazine. You could take this bad boy and throw in a drum magazine and go to town with like 60 rounds or something crazy. But, that defeats the purpose of the task that this gun is designed to do. And for me, that's concealed carry. That's low visibility, low footprint. I don't even need an optic on this. I don't need a light on this. This thing is just designed to spit the bullet. It is the phone flashlight concealed carry of your daily pick. If you don't have your concealed carry on you, you should have the same emotional feeling as when you go, oh God, I don't have my cell phone. This should be the same familiar weight. Because ultimately, you're probably never going to need to use this in a major emergency. But if there ever is a major emergency, chances are this is the light you're gonna have. Do you understand the metaphor here? Hopefully. Perfect. Now, we're moving on to your mid-size pistol, right? This guy. Now, what I'm recommending here is you want a pistol that, if you need to, you can conceal it. But also, if you need to punch out a little bit further than what you could get from a 3 1/4 inch barrel, you can do so. Now, 9mm is an interesting round because up to a certain point, barrel length actually gives it more muzzle velocity, more pounds it gives it more pounds of stopping power, rather, when it's actually going out of the right length. So HK, I believe, was the company that did this study, and they found that optimum length was around 11 inches, 12 inches. So with pistols, obviously, we're not running around with 12-inch pistols. That would be unrealistic. But it also makes sense why they use 9mm into certain pistol caliber carbines like the MP5, etc., etc. So, moving up, we want a longer barrel length. This is a Dan Wesson compact, right? So, what's beautiful about this DWX compact is you can conceal this if you want to. It's got a 15-round capacity, and it's still flushed to the actual magwell. So, see how there's like a little gap, like there's not a lot of gap there? That's when you start playing with polymer guns and comparing them to the Glock, you'll notice that with the Glock, even when it's set and seated, there's not really that fit, that finish, right? It's not quite as crisp. Now you see the Glock has a shorter barrel length. You'll notice they both have a beaver tail, but it's unmistakable the quality difference between the two. Now, magazines are interesting to me because when you compare the dimensions of the magazine, you'll notice they're roughly the same size, you know? But this has 5 more capacity than this. See what I mean? Just the engineering and the design, just making it a double stack, you're able to get 5 more rounds. So for me, the result of having a higher magazine count, obviously, is it allows you to have the peace of mind of knowing, in the off chance that I'm not the best shot, maybe there's more than one person or target, whatever it is that you're dealing with, this gives you a higher chance of dealing with that within that, set. And then finally, this concealable, and just like this flashlight, if we need to, carry it, let people know we're carrying, have it on the belt because you're out at the range or you're practicing, it can fit, it can work in the holster, it's got a nice, workable, full-size kind of feel, even though it's a compact, right? You can get your hand completely around it. And then finally, your 5-inch and above, like full-size pistols. Okay, so these are typically guns that you're not going to be able to conceal carry unless you're like a mammoth of a man, and good on you if you can. I am a short person. I cannot concealed carry something like this, right? So this is like my range toy gun, right? This is the gun I keep on the nightstand. This is the gun I have at the place that I keep it at, and if something goes wrong, I go and get the gun, there. So this isn't necessarily the big crazy flashlight, right? If I really wanted to conceal this, I could put a shoulder holster on it and put on an overcoat, It's beautiful. And the cool thing about a shoulder holster is you just look so cool. People will stop and be like, damn, how did he get so cool so suddenly? Also, some people might think you're a lunatic. Hey, it's highways run both ways, right? So the real question is what's the right pistol for you? And if you're going out and you're trying to purchase a pistol because you're trying to improve your base shooting skills. You want to be able to operate a handgun. You are trying to get better at shooting and hone your abilities because one day shooting might be a hobby for you. Well, then I would encourage you to actually look towards your more mid-range pistols. I would not encourage you to go out and buy the cheapest thing that spits a bullet made by a major manufacturer. I would really encourage you to go out and find something that fits your ergonomics, your grip, helps you find your index, your sight alignment, right? So your index is when you pull your pistol up and you're making your target. How quick you can naturally get your natural point of aim to the target just from bringing it up. Different guns will work better for you just because they feel more natural for your grip than other firearms. And there's no way for me to properly diagnose what's going to feel right for you unless you actually go out to a range, go to a gun store, and actually work with some of the guns and feel them and work the slides and see how they operate, learn their history. It can be a process, but it's very rewarding if that's what you're trying to do. Now, if you're just trying to get a gun that spits bullets to keep in the nightstand because you want to be able to protect your family when things go bump in the night, and you don't really care if the gun has panel gaps, etc., 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 is a good way to put it. Well, then I really recommend just a good old striker fire pistol, chambered in 9mm. Make it a Glock, make it a Smith & Wesson product, make it a Beretta, make it a Ruger. There's so many good, a Walther. There's so many good 9mm options out there that it's hard to go wrong. Get a striker fire because they generally are more reliable. They're not going to be the funnest to shoot, and if you're not trying to be the person that has fun at the range, and you're not actually going out there to have a good time, you're just like, I'm here to get my rounds in, make sure I can defend the house, hoss. Well, then be that person. That's fine. Just know who you are before you go into the gun store, so the gun store salesman doesn't just try and turn you into a cell. There's nothing worse than going in there looking for knowledge and then you're just spun out the door holding something you didn't really want, and then I end up buying it from you on Gunbroker. So that leaves us to the pistol, rifle, shotgun argument, right? If you're looking for a pistol, those are what I would recommend for you, right? And again, your use cases may vary. You might be in bear country and need a 357 or a 10mm, and that's on you to know. I don't live near bears. I don't need bear ammo. You might need bear ammo. Make sense? Now, if there's a weapon that you have that you're not necessarily familiar with how it operates, how to clean it, how to disassemble the weapon so that you can clean it, and of course reassemble it back together afterwards without turning it into some sort of shoddy pipe bomb. These are important questions to ask, and oftentimes the internet is a wealth of information. If there's a specific gun that you'd like me to go over, whether it's its history or something like that, let me know. It's always something I enjoy doing. Anyways, what we've covered today, we went over the difference between old, obsolete, and ineffective. And hopefully that metaphor is kind of shining with a few of you with what weapons and what weapon systems make sense for you. And also, we've touched on what different styles of handguns, what different tools you might actually use for different situations, and what might make sense in your situation. In no way am I trying to endorse a certain brand or shit on a specific one, but there are certain brands that personally I feel more comfortable relying on than others, especially when it comes to self-defense. If it's a gun that I'm going out to go have fun with at the range, well, sometimes reliability is not the most important currency of the realm at the time. Now, if there's something I'm carrying around that I need it to go bang when I really need it to go bang, that's when I might gravitate towards that option. Anyways, I hope this helps some of you, and if you have any more questions, feel free to comment down below. I'd love to hear them.